Hello and welcome back to the Yogi Collection. I am Yogi, your curator through the fascinating world of collectibles. I love collecting stuff. Right now I have a huge collection of Lego that dates back to the late 90s. I started with collecting Lego Star Wars exclusively, but now I've moved into motorsports and I find myself collecting speed champions as well as the Technic cars like the Lamborghini Cyan or the Ferrari SP3. So I have a lot of experience acquiring valuable collectibles throughout the years, and I want to share that with you today. I believe that what you'll find that differentiates me from other YouTube influencers is that I'm not trying to sell you something. Instead, what I'm trying to do is educate you in not only why these cars are so collectible, but the history behind these vehicles and the motorsports pedigree that comes with it. In addition to playing with miniature versions of these cars, I actually have an alternate channel called Yogi's Garage, where I've been currently restoring a 2002 Porsche 911, and I'll be moving over to the 2005 Porsche Turbo S in the spring. So be sure to give that channel a sub. I've been promising to curate my collection of these for a long time, and today is the day. That's right, folks, we're going to be talking about Formula One. It's the talk of the town, it's the topic on everybody's mind. Here we are in 2024, who's going to win it again? I think it's going to be Max. And everybody's got eyes on Bahrain for the first race of the season. And it really shouldn't come as a surprise to you that Formula One is as popular as it's ever been, especially with the Netflix series Drive to Survive. And with F1 being so popular at this time, toy makers, model makers, clothing manufacturers are all getting in on the popularity and trying to capitalize on our love for the sport. And for me, it's about 143 scale and 164 scale Formula One cars. I'm trying to collect just about every year's model of car, and I'm finding that to be extremely daunting. And there's such a rich history with Formula One, there's no way that I could cover everything in one video. So what I want to do is I want to focus on one specific era of Formula One in each video, and then from there, I'll give you some insights on why it's important, who are the important drivers, and how cool the cars were at the time. But for right now, we're going to talk about the most recent era, the hybrid turbo era. That covers the years of 2014 to today. But before we get started, if you like videos like this, be sure to take a moment and hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, let me know you like what you're seeing, let me know you don't like it, let me know I'm wrong. Any feedback is better than no feedback. So I'd love to have your subscription, and with that, welcome to the show. As much as I want to start with the most modern era, we can't talk about where we are without talking about where we're from. And for Formula One, that goes all the way back to 1950. The Fédération Internationale des Automobiles, or FIA, formalized the World Championship of Drivers in 1950, marking the official start of the Formula One World Championship. The first race took place at Silverstone, England, and was won by Giuseppe Farina driving an Alfa Romeo. Although there was indeed motor racing prior to the formation of Formula One, it was a pivotal moment in the history of motorsport, marking the beginning of a new era of professional, regulated car racing that would evolve into the global phenomenon it is today. So as part of recognizing and appreciating that era of motorsports, without it, we wouldn't be here, I have before you a Ferrari D50 from 1956, driven by the one and only Juan Manuel Fangio. And Fangio is a name that's synonymous with motorsports because in most talking circles and most debates, he's considered the godfather, the greatest, the GOAT of all motorsports. And I think mainly that's because he actually helped pioneer this era, but you cannot discount what he's done for the sport and what he's done for history. Now, the model itself should look familiar to you as far as the color is concerned. That is Ferrari red. In this particular era, the engine was in front, as you can see here. As far as aerodynamics and tire and downforce technologies, yeah, none of that existed here. This was man, machine, and the road. and oftentimes it ended in loss of life, and not just of the driver, but sometimes loss of life of fans such as ourselves. I mean, look at this thing. There's absolutely no safety features, no roll cage, roll bar, anything to protect the driver's head if the car is to roll. This thing was a death trap. I mean, in the beginning, they didn't even have seat belts for the driver. Oh, and here comes Charles Leclerc in his SF21 from the 2021 season. And wow, what a difference. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a tremendous difference, but there's also a difference in design philosophy. The key point here is that the engine is in front of the driver, whereas obviously in the modern day, the engine's in the rear. Another key difference would be around safety. Note that the driver in the 1950s basically had what looks to me like an office chair and a wooden steering wheel and the tiniest windscreen. I'm not even sure what it was designed to do other than maybe keep the bugs out of his face. Whereas on Charles' side, you have the halo, which was implemented in the 2018 season. But the overall philosophy of the open wheel, open cockpit design remains the same today. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's move on to the hybrid turbo era. So I feel that the hybrid turbo era can be summarized in a couple of ways. They're focusing on fuel efficiency and environmental sustainability, which we all need to be aware of, as well as being able to use aerodynamic efficiency and tire management to eliminate the need to stop and refuel. Now, you still have to change tires, but refueling is not an option anymore. Some key drivers of this era are Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, of course, Lewis Hamilton, the GOAT, and the new soon-to-be GOAT, Max Verstappen. We have the poster boy of Formula One, Danny Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, and from Ferrari, we have Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. So for me, it's not just about the car, it's also about the driver, right? I mean, you can't have a fantastic car, but a terrible driver. They have to work together. So I'm going to be covering not only the pedigree of the car, but the driver and anything important I think you should know, as well as covering the brands who are building and making these things for us to purchase, and give you some side-by-side comparisons of a lower-end brand compared to a higher-end brand. And some of these brands are Burago, Spark or Sparky, Mini GT, of course, and Mini Champs. All right, let's kick things off with the world champion from 2023, Max Verstappen in RB19. This particular model was made by Spark. I would consider Spark to be upper middle level quality and perhaps even lower high-end quality compared to some of the European boutiques out there. Now, this particular model is special because this is Max Verstappen's first win of 2023. He then went on to win all but 3 of the following races for the remainder of the year. Yeah, total domination in this car. And my prediction for 2024, more Max, more Red Bull. Now, I paid $99 for this model, and I've looked recently, and it's gone up about 10 to 20% in price. So it's certainly a good investment. Now, there's no playability in this car whatsoever. The wheels are fixed in place, and really, since you paid $100 or even more than that, it's not really meant to be played with. But I wanted to see if the wheels would roll, and they absolutely do not. I'm really quite pleased with the level of detail that Spark has put into this model. The pitot tubes and all of those little fine details on the nose of the car really stand out. And when I show you another brand, you'll see what I'm talking about when it comes to this level of detail. The carbon fiber looks real, and just overall, the liveries look authentic. Now, my personal favorite detail of this whole model has got to be the helmet. I mean, look at that. You can see the Oracle branding on his visor and his Max Verstappen logo in great detail. And if you go even further, you can see that his fire suit is also heavily detailed. So again, really, really nice detail for $100. And not to be outdone is the second place winner of the Drivers' Championship in 2023 is Sergio Perez, or Checo Perez. The difference between this model and the previous one is that this is the Red Bull or RB18 from 2022. And this specific RB18, Sergio Perez won the Singapore Grand Prix. All in all, the differences between the RB18 and the RB19 models are pretty subtle. However, here you can see that the car is equipped with the wet performance tires because the Singapore GP was indeed wet. These kinds of details really sell it for me. And both of these models were manufactured by Spark. And here's a great example of the level of detail you're going to get from Spark. I just love the helmet design, and Checo Perez's helmet is the specific helmet from that Grand Prix. I mean, this is awesome. In addition, those of you with the keen eye for detail will also notice, yes, there are subtle differences between RB18 and RB19. Just to point a few out, the engine cooling management is a little bit different in placement, as well as the access ports or the access panels on top of the side pods. And also there's a slight difference in the suspension setup. The level of detail didn't stop with just the top of the race car, but also underneath or the floor of the vehicle is accurately depicted. I bring this up because not all models will have this level of detail, as you're about to see. Speaking of the differences of level of detail, here's one from Burago. Burago's been popping up everywhere lately. I've seen them being sold now at Walmart and Target, and they're really fairly priced. I mean, we're talking between on sale around $8 to as high as $11. And if you're lucky, you'll find some that actually have a driver depicted. And as your curator, I would recommend that you collect those instead of the driverless models. Unfortunately, this RB18 did not come with Max Verstappen, but I still liked it overall because of the playability. The only knock on the tires is that if you look close enough, you can see the seam going down the middle of the tire, whereas on the Spark, they look like genuine rubber tires. In fact, one of them that you saw earlier, I don't know if you noticed, but had kind of a rough finish on it, depicting that the tire had been driven on and it's not a fresh slick. Some collectors might be turned off by that, but again, from the playability standpoint, to set them up, and being such a cheap model, you have less of an issue with them collecting dust or some kid grabbing it off of your shelf and playing with it. My opinion on the floor is a little split. The Burago really does a great job indicating a carbon fiber finish, but I'm not sure if it's authentic as it would be in real life. So on the Spark, you got to give it to them because it looks like molded carbon fiber and not just a carbon fiber finish. Here's one more look at those finer details that you can only get in the more expensive $100 model. Understandably so, you spend $7, you should not expect to get this. But overall, I think the Burago has a place, $7 price point. I'm going to be using them for my stop motion videos, which, by the way, you'll notice I'm not doing any stop motion in this video. I didn't get really a positive response from my transport truck video, so I'm not sure if that's where I should go and dedicate my time. But if you guys like the stop motion, be sure to leave a comment below and let me know, because I would love to do stop motion on Formula One. So speaking of Burago models that have drivers in them, here's Charles Leclerc in his SF21, and I want to pause it here so you can take a look at the differences and the compromises that you're making buying one of their cars with a driver. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't really notice it until curating this video. Although having the helmet in there to indicate that there is a driver present, you can tell that the fire suit is not even painted at all. It's the same paint as the body of the model, and the suspension is really out of scale. It honestly looks like somebody put two forks on there and glued them to the body, and the paint job overall is just really thick and almost caked on. So I wanted this so I could see what it looked like with the driver, but it's clear that Burago's trying to hit a price point as best as they can. They do sell one model level up from here, and I'll be giving you an example of a higher level Burago later in the video. The floor detail is almost one-dimensional here, so again, not a great model, but fun to play with. The SF21 allowed Ferrari to take third place in the Constructors' Championships for 2021, and it was a huge improvement over the 2020 model. And here's Carlos Sainz's SF21. I'm going to give you a quick look at this since it's identical to Charles Leclerc's, but I did want to show you the helmet detail. Pretty good, not bad. They look like water slide decals, and again, that paint, ugh. Not a very good model from Burago. Okay, we're going to stick with Burago, and this time we're going to look at George Russell's Mercedes AMG F1 W13E Performance. This W13 was released in 2022, and that was the first year of aerodynamic changes implemented for the new cars. And for the F1 fans in the audience, you'll recall that this was the year that they had major porpoising or bouncing issues on the straights. Despite major issues with the car for Russell and Hamilton, Russell was able to secure a single victory in the São Paulo Grand Prix with this car. But overall, it was a disappointing model year and a disappointing year for Mercedes in general. Although they placed third at the end in the Constructors' Championship, it was 2 places lower from where they were for 8 straight years. So this was a huge disappointment for the team. And, quite frankly, worth collecting because of that. All right, here's another one from Burago. This is Lewis Hamilton's car, minus Lewis Hamilton. And the detail is dialed up just a little bit on this one. So this model is W12, which is from 2021. And this was the year that Max Verstappen won his first championship. So again, another key reason to collect it is because it was the car that Lewis Hamilton lost the championship, and it's the car that Max Verstappen beat in order to win his first championship. All right, now that we have an idea of what Burago looks like and their level of quality, let's switch back to a higher end model, and this one's one of my crown jewels. This is Lewis Hamilton's championship car when he won his 7th in a row championship. In my opinion, the paint and the livery is probably one of the best that Mercedes ever put out on the grid. It's a beautiful combination of shiny gloss black with silver and white starred emblems, and all of the livery combined, and the carbon fiber depicted by Spark is just a total package. Even the tires are accurate, and then when you look at his helmet, if you look close enough, you can see that he's got a Black Lives Matter decal on the top of his helmet. And if you go back to 2020 and remember what it was like back then, we were dealing with COVID, protests, an upcoming election, a lot of things were going down, and Hamilton has always been in front of all of that, and he's a major ambassador for equal rights. Okay, this part of the model is a bit controversial for me, because to me it looks like the model has been repaired. I'm not entirely sure. I'll never know for sure unless I get somebody to show me a picture of theirs, and whether or not they have the same glue marks, I'm not sure. But another strike is that the floor is just completely lacking detail. But other than that, if you look at it from the top or from the front or from the back, the model looks fantastic. Except for those 2 little issues, this thing would be perfect. And this Spark model, I paid about $145. It's worth a little bit more than that now, but it came with these 5 or 6 pit boards celebrating Lewis Hamilton winning the World Championship for the 7th straight time. Okay, and for my papaya fans or McLaren fans, here's a blast from the past. Here's Danny Ricciardo's Formula One car. And if you remember, Danny Ricciardo had, I believe, a single season with McLaren and did not do well at all. Maybe 2 seasons. But regardless, this here is the McLaren F1 MCL 36. Usually those numbers indicate how many iterations of these models have been made. And if 36 is any indication, that should tell you that McLaren has been in the business for a very long time. And this model is made by Burago, so you're well aware of the level of detail or lack thereof if you look a little too close. I have a Papaya Formula One Lego Technic car that I'll be showing you guys in a future video. Now here's one of my favorite racing liveries on the grid, and this is Alfa Romeo, and this particular car belongs to Joe Granu, and it's made by Burago, but I'm really happy with the way Burago did the livery and the paint job on this car. It's one of my favorite from them. But the star of my Alfa Romeo collection is this one by Spark, but this car belongs to the one and only Valtteri Bottas. Yeah, I don't know what it is, whether it is the color combination, because my favorite color is red, and the metallic paint. I just don't know what it is about this car, but I really enjoyed it, and the level of detail that Spark did on this is off the charts. One of the biggest highlights for me are these metal struts that hold the floor together along the side pod. What a great touch, and you won't see that in the Burago when I show you in a minute. The graining in the carbon fiber is a nice touch, although a little wide, but it does look really good on this. And of course, Valtteri Bottas' helmet, you can really see that there's a good deal of detail that Spark put into the helmet. Now here's a side comparison with the Spark on the left and the Burago on the right. You can immediately see the difference in the paint. There's the red on the left is way brighter, way more metallic. And I believe that those little buckles or square looking things were special to that livery for that race. And the one on the right is just their standard livery. And this is probably one of the best angles to really see the difference between the Burago and the Spark. Obviously, first and foremost, the tires, that seam down the middle, it's just really a turnoff. And there's nothing you can do about that, because if you try to sand it, that seam goes all the way through. And of course, the red blinking lights in the back, I call them brake lights. They're not really brake lights. On the wings, as well as on the center stub on the end. Hopefully, I'm not coming off as being too harsh on Burago. It's just, again, it's a price point thing for me. But for all fairness, I went out and I found a higher grade model from Burago, and this one here is pretty special. This one is the Red Bull RB16B Turkish Grand Prix Special Livery. And again, from a collector's point of view, anything that has the word special or one of a kind or one ofs or bespoke, those are collectibles, and this is a collectible. So regardless of it being Burago and of lesser quality, and I think I only paid $20 for it, and it's still going for about $20 to $24 if you can find it. So for me, it was all about the livery, and not to mention that this was before Max Verstappen won any championships. So you'll notice that his number is 33, and that was his original number before he won his first world championship. Typically, the winner of the world championship will adorn the number 1.
Nerd alert!
Oh, I thought we were going to avoid doing this in this video, but it looks like we're not. Yeah, nerd alert. Yes, I have this special segment in my videos where I deep dive into more of the nerdy aspects of the sport or of the technology, and everybody keeps telling me, your whole video is a nerd alert. But I'm still keeping it, so yes, nerd alert. This is where we're really going to get into the weeds. You ready? Let's go. Now, originally, Max did not take the number 1, but he did eventually switch over to number 1, perhaps after his first championship. If you have an idea, give me a comment below and let me know. Others to not take the number 1 would be Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, and Nico Rosenberg. But other than that, everyone else has taken number 1 when they started doing that tradition. When did they start this tradition, you ask? Good question. See, this is why I do this nerd alert, so that we can, learn. Initially, car numbers were allocated race by race, but it wasn't until the 1960s that teams began to retain consistent numbers throughout a season. Now, the specific tradition of retaining the number 1 for a world champion happened in 1973, and his teammate typically received the number 2. Wow. So you are already designated number 2 and you haven't even proven yourself. Huh. Poor Sergio. Now, the introduction of the permanent driver number was in 2014, and that's where drivers chose specific numbers that they carry throughout their F1 career. And it ends up becoming their brand. In case you haven't noticed, a lot of them will incorporate the number into their brand in some way. And when you look at it from that perspective, it makes sense. Your number is your brand, and you're going to carry that brand with you even after you retire from the sport. So I can understand why some drivers would prefer not to change their number to the number 1. But Max Verstappen did eventually do that. Now, I'm wondering if it's because he intends on dominating long enough that they're going to retire the number 1 probably in 2032. I kid. This special livery was introduced in 2021 to celebrate the relationship between Red Bull and Honda. Honda became the engine provider for Red Bull Racing starting in 2019. And after Honda left, Red Bull established their own powertrains division called Red Bull Powertrains. The real standout of this livery, though, is the Japanese characters, which when translated are arigato, or thank you. Honda became Red Bull's powertrain provider after some tumultuous years with Renault, their other powertrain provider. They weren't getting the performance they needed out of the engine, so they eventually made the decision to switch to Honda, and thus history was written. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed that nerd alert. I'm not making any promises that it won't pop its head up again in this video, but right now, that's the end of this one. Alright, here's another one of my crown jewels. This one's my absolute favorite, to be perfectly honest. This one is also made by Spark. I swear, I have other ones that aren't made by Spark or Burago. This is the Aston Martin AMR 22 from 2022, and this is actually the last time Sebastian Vettel drove a Formula 1 car. So he retired in 2022, and this is the last time he's been behind the wheel. And so this is, that by itself makes it a collectible. I'm going to try to avoid triggering the nerd alert here, but for those of you who don't know who Sebastian Vettel is, he is now, again, retired, but a 4-time world champion for Red Bull. He won his championships from 2010 to 2013, right before the dawn of the Mercedes era. After Red Bull, he moved on to Ferrari and then eventually moved on to Aston Martin, where he retired. And that's where this car comes from. Now, Sebastian Vettel as a person is a great dude. I mean, he is like the most laid-back person you'll see in the paddocks. And he's got the long hair. He's just really cool. So I really appreciate that about him. His driving style is really cool. And he's a world champion. So all of those things check the boxes to make this a true collectible. Although this model is not included in the hybrid turbo era, this is from the V8 era, but it needs to be mentioned here because this is the car that Sebastian Vettel won his second world championship in. This one here is made by Mini Champs, so there you go, not a Spark or Burago, and it's limited to 2,511 pieces, so this is a pretty rare model, and the detail from Mini Champs just takes the cake, man. I mean, Spark is great. Burago is what you get, and Mini Champs is the cream of the crop as far as I'm concerned. I mean, look at these tires, the wheels, the livery, everything is just top notch, and then the helmet. The helmet really sealed the deal, and the detail in the fire suit, all of it. Now, as far as the time period, the V8 engines sound amazing for its time, and here's a sample of what a V8 engine F1 sounds like, compared to the next generation 1.6 liter V6s with turbos. And now here's the V6. Yeah, no comparison. If you think that's awesome, the V12s were even better, but I'm not going to go that deep because I don't want to trigger the nerd alert. All right, next up. Now, this is a complete coincidence that this is 1/64 scale for this driver, but it is what it is. All right, this one's from Mini GT, which is the 4th offering that I have for you today, and it is, again, 1/64 scale, and the reason why I was laughing about this is because this is for Yuki Tsunoda, who is one of the shortest drivers on the grid. I think he's 4'11", but it was a complete accident. I just couldn't get AlphaTauri in the 1/43 scale. But the model itself has really good detail. If you guys aren't familiar with Mini GT, let me know if you'd like me to do a video on Mini GT. I have a huge collection of different kinds from JDM to German, and I would love to show that to you. So let me know down below. Mini GTs typically will come in at a price around $12 US, and they're somewhat playable, although there are some parts on there that are a little delicate. All right, I'm going to run through both of these at the same time since they're basically the same model, just for different drivers. This one's also Mini GT, and this is RB19 for the man, and Sergio Perez. I'm touching tips here because I want to illustrate that these are made of die cast, not that there's any type of animosity or frustration between the drivers. So before I wrap up this show, I wanted to show you one more thing in my collection, and that is this half-scale Red Bull racing helmet from Sergio Perez. He wore this in the inaugural Miami GP race a couple of years ago, and I love the color combination, and again, it's collectible because of the fact that this is from the first race in Miami. Very cool helmet. I'm not entirely convinced that this is half scale because this thing would not fit on my head even if it was triple the size. Or maybe it's because I have a big head. I'm not sure. Alright guys, I'm going to wrap up this video. I want to really thank you guys for sticking it out all the way to the end. And hopefully you learned something on this journey into the turbo hybrid era. I had a lot of fun making this video, and I also learned a whole lot more about the sport. And just like diecast, there are different price points for everybody's budget, from all the way down to a $7 Burago, which is also playable, to all the way up to a $100, $200, 143 scale collectible, something that's going to grow in price, and someday you could pass it on to your family members when you're gone. So thanks again. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider doing so. It's free to you. It means a lot to me. And if not, leave a thumbs up, leave a thumbs down, or do both. I really appreciate all your support. And with that, the collection is closed.